Columbine High School Massacre, the tragedy that shocked the world.
On April 20th, 1999, two students turned Columbine High School into a killing ground. It started as a normal morning in Littleton, Colorado. The sun was bright, the sky perfectly clear. Just another spring day at Columbine High School. Teenagers filled the hallways with laughter, books slammed shut, sneakers squeaked on polished floors. Nobody imagined that within an hour, those same corridors would echo with screams. At 11:19 a.m., the first gunshot broke the calm. It sounded like fireworks, until bodies started to fall. Chaos erupted, phones jammed, and terrified students hid under desks, whispering prayers they never thought they'd need. What happened that day would redefine the meaning of school safety. 13 innocent lives were taken, and two teenage killers became the face of modern terror. Stay with this story, because understanding how it began might be the only way to stop it from happening again. April 20th, 1999. A Tuesday morning in Littleton, Colorado. The spring air carried the scent of fresh grass and cafeteria pizza. It was the kind of day that felt too ordinary to ever be remembered. But by noon, Columbine High School would become a name whispered with dread around the world. Inside the two-story brick building, over 1,900 students went about their routines. Final exams ahead, prom just days away. Teachers prepared lessons, and the library hummed with quiet conversation. Among the crowd were two seniors, Eric Harris, 18, and Dylan Klebold, 17. To most, they were just another pair of awkward kids in long black coats, part of a small clique who called themselves the Trenchcoat Mafia. Few knew what they were really planning. For nearly a year, the boys had been recording videos in Eric's basement, ranting about revenge, power, and hatred. They had built crude pipe bombs, collected guns through loopholes in the law, and mapped the school's layout like soldiers preparing for war. The date was no accident. It was Hitler's birthday, a twisted symbol of the destruction they dreamed of unleashing. That morning, they loaded their cars with weapons and propane bombs, smiling for the last time. The plan was simple: detonate the cafeteria at lunch, drive survivors into chaos, and gun down anyone trying to escape. But when the bombs failed to explode at 11:17 a.m., the plan changed, and the killing began. By 12:08 p.m., 13 people would be dead, 24 wounded, and two teenage gunmen would take their own lives. The attack lasted less than an hour, but its echoes would haunt America for decades. The morning began like any other. Eric Harris woke up before sunrise. He wrote one last line in his journal: "I hate this world. Today will be the day I become God." Then he slipped the notebook under his bed, zipped up his long black trench coat, and walked out of his room for the last time. Across town, Dylan Klebold was staring at himself in the mirror. His hands trembled as he adjusted his black baseball cap. "It's too late to turn back," he whispered. His mother thought he was heading to school early for a project. He smiled at her, said, "I love you," and walked out the door carrying a duffel bag filled with bombs. At 10:58 a.m., the two met in the parking lot of Columbine High. Surveillance footage later showed them laughing, not nervously, but almost giddy. Their cars, parked at opposite ends of the cafeteria entrance, were packed with propane tanks rigged to explode at 11:17 a.m. Each bomb was strong enough to kill hundreds if it worked. As they waited, students passed by,
unaware that death was minutes away. Eric adjusted the straps of his carbine rifle, hidden under the coat. Dylan checked his shotgun, the metal cold against his palm. Inside the cafeteria, the clock ticked closer to 11:17. Lunch trays clattered, students joked about homework, and someone flipped a coin onto the table, the sound echoing in perfect timing with destiny. When the bombs failed to detonate, Eric's face tightened. He cursed under his breath. Plan A was gone. He reached into his coat, pulled out the first gun, and said quietly, "Let's go to Plan B." At 11:19 a.m., the first shot rang out. A moment of silence followed, the kind that only comes before history changes forever. 11:19 a.m. The first gunshot cracked the air outside Columbine High. Students near the west entrance turned their heads, confused. Some even smiled, thinking it was a senior prank. Then came a second shot, and someone fell to the ground. Laughter turned into screaming. On the grass, Rachel Scott, 17, was sitting with her friend Richard Castaldo, eating lunch. The bullet hit her first. She fell instantly. Richard tried to crawl away, but another round tore through his chest. Eric Harris advanced, his boots crushing paper lunch bags, eyes burning with fury. He turned to Dylan. "Let's keep going." Within seconds, glass shattered along the library windows above them. Inside, students ducked under tables, frozen in disbelief. Teachers shouted for lockdown, but few knew what that meant in 1999. The school had no real plan for this. Eric fired down the hallway, bullets sparking against lockers. A student dropped his books, physics homework scattered, a formula for gravity lying in blood. Dylan threw a pipe bomb that rolled across the floor, hissed, and filled the air with choking smoke. The blast was small, but terrifying enough to send everyone running. Outside, Deputy Neil Gardner, the school resource officer, heard the shots and rushed toward the parking lot. He spotted Eric, raised his pistol, and fired. Bullets ripped through car windows, but both missed. Eric turned, aimed his rifle, and fired back, pinning Gardner behind his patrol car. It was the first gunfight ever recorded between a police officer and a school shooter. For the next few minutes, chaos took control. Fire alarms blared, sprinklers rained down in the cafeteria, and smoke poured through the hallways. Some students fled outside doors. Others hid in classrooms, barricading themselves with desks. Mini reveal. The cafeteria cameras captured something chilling. At 11:22 a.m., both bomb timers blinked 00:00, showing they had indeed counted down. They simply hadn't ignited. The killer's plan had almost worked. Eric looked toward the school's west entrance, smirked, and shouted, "Let's go inside." And with that, the real massacre began. 11:29 a.m. The library was supposed to be the safest place in the school. It became the deadliest. Dozens of students crouched beneath tables, clutching their phones, whispering prayers, trying not to breathe too loudly. The fire alarm screamed through the smoke, red lights flickering over their faces. Then footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold entered through the north door, trench coats billowing like shadows. "Everyone get up!" Eric yelled. No one moved. "Fine," he said. "We'll find you ourselves." They opened fire. bullets tearing through computer monitors, bookshelves, and bodies. Windows exploded, the smell of gunpowder mixed with carpet smoke. One boy tried to crawl toward a back exit. Eric laughed, aimed, and pulled the trigger. At one table, a terrified student whispered a prayer. Dylan heard it. He leaned down and asked mockingly, "Do you believe in God?" She hesitated, then answered, "Yes." Dylan paused, looked at her, and shot. Her name was Cassie Bernal, 17 years old. Her final words would echo through churches across America. For the next 7 minutes, the library became a killing field. 10 people were murdered there, 12 others wounded. Some begged for their lives. Others froze, paralyzed. Eric reloaded calmly, almost mechanically. Dylan tossed another pipe bomb under a table. It fizzled, smoke rising, but didn't explode. Mini reveal. After the attack, investigators found nearly 95 unexploded devices across the school. Proof that the boys' homemade arsenal had mostly failed. If even half had worked, hundreds more would have died. By 11:36 a.m., the gunfire stopped. The boys looked around. 20 minutes since the first shot, yet it felt like hours. Eric raised his gun toward a window, fired at police outside, then turned to Dylan. "That's enough here," he said. They left the library as quietly as they had entered, leaving behind silence, broken only by the soft ring of a cell phone, calling a name that would never answer again. 11:44 a.m. Smoke drifted through the halls like a living thing, thick, gray, choking. The fire alarm kept screaming, sprinklers pouring water over blood-stained floors. Eric and Dylan moved through the school like hunters searching for ghosts. Most students had already fled or were hiding behind locked classroom doors. In the cafeteria, they fired randomly into empty tables, glass exploding under the strobe of the alarm lights. One of them kicked over a propane tank, muttering in frustration. The bombs they'd spent months building hadn't done what they dreamed, but the fear they caused was enough. Surveillance footage later showed them laughing, pointing at the cameras, and pretending to shoot them. It was a performance now, a twisted kind of fame. They filmed themselves on a handheld camera earlier that morning, promising the world would remember their names. 11:56 a.m. They walked into the science wing, tossing another small bomb. The blast rattled lockers but hurt no one. Somewhere a teacher whispered through a 911 call, "They're still here. Please hurry." SWAT teams were surrounding the building, but command couldn't risk entry, not with reports of explosives everywhere. By 12:02 p.m., Eric and Dylan returned to the library. The air was heavy with gunpowder and silence. Survivors still hid beneath tables, some covered in the blood of their friends. The killers stood in the middle of the room, surveying the destruction they had created. Dylan spoke softly. "It's almost time." Eric nodded, raised his shotgun to his mouth. At 12:08 p.m., 2 final blasts echoed through the library. And then, silence. Mini reveal. When investigators later reviewed their journals and videos, they discovered that both had intended to survive, to escape the chaos and watch the news coverage from afar. Their failure, the bombs, the resistance, the confusion, had driven them to finish the plan themselves. Outside, police advanced slowly into the school. The shooting was over. But inside, the clock on the wall still ticked toward 12:09. as if time itself refused to believe what had just happened. When the gunfire stopped, silence didn't mean safety. The halls of Columbine were filled with alarms, smoke, and unanswered cries for help.
Police officers crouched behind patrol cars outside, unsure whether the shooters were still alive. Through shattered windows, they could see movement. Students crawling, waving shirts to signal rescue. 12:30 p.m. The first SWAT teams entered the building. They moved cautiously, room by room, past backpacks that might be bombs, past motionless bodies. Every corner could hide a trap. The air reeked of smoke and gasoline from failed explosives. Officers shouted, "If you can hear my voice, come out with your hands up." Dozens of terrified students emerged, some barefoot, some covered in blood that wasn't their own. In the library, the officers found them, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, lying side by side on the floor, guns still in their hands. Eric had shot himself in the mouth, Dylan through the temple. Between them lay spent shells, pipe bombs, and journals soaked in water from the sprinklers. The nightmare had ended, at least on the surface. By afternoon, the school grounds were surrounded by police, ambulances, and news vans. Parents screamed names across the barricades, searching for faces that never appeared. The media captured everything: chaos, tears, confusion. America watched live as a suburban high school transformed into a war zone. Investigators from Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, FBI, and ATF spent days combing through the wreckage. What they found was horrifying. 99 explosive devices, from crude pipe bombs to propane tanks wired with timers. Detailed maps of the school, escape routes, and target zones. Notebooks filled with rage, drawings, and countdowns to Judgment Day. Many reveal one. Among the evidence were videotapes, later known as the basement tapes. In them, Eric and Dylan sat in a dim basement, calmly explaining their motives. Eric smiled into the camera. "You'll all wish you'd been nicer to us." Dylan, quieter, said, "This is for us to be remembered." The investigation uncovered that they had been planning the massacre for nearly a year, ordering guns through friends who exploited legal loopholes, practicing at shooting ranges, testing bombs in open fields. They had even studied police response times to maximize casualties. Many reveal, too. Police records showed that Eric Harris had already been reported months before the shooting for threats and illegal activity online, but the warnings were lost in paperwork. If those reports had been followed, the massacre might have been prevented. In the weeks that followed, funerals filled Littleton's churches. Crosses lined the hillsides, one for each of the 13 victims. Teachers returned to empty classrooms, where notebooks lay open mid-sentence. The world demanded answers. How 2 middle-class teenagers became mass murderers. FBI profilers examined their psychology. Eric was identified as a clinical psychopath, manipulative, arrogant, craving domination. Dylan, by contrast, was severely depressed, suicidal, and easily led. Together, they created a deadly balance. One's hatred fueled the other's despair. The aftermath changed everything. Police departments across the U.S. redefined active shooter response. No longer waiting for backup, but entering immediately to stop the threat. Schools installed metal detectors, security cameras, and drills that would become routine for generations of American children. Mini Reveal 3. In 2004, previously sealed documents confirmed that the boys' bombs were designed to detonate first, collapsing the cafeteria and killing hundreds before the shooting even began. The fact that both propane tanks failed by a fraction of a second was the only reason the death toll wasn't catastrophic. Yet, no trial ever came. No sentencing. No closure in a courtroom. The killers had taken the truth with them. What remained were fragments, their journals, their words, and a lingering question. Why?
By the time investigators closed the case, the school had been rebuilt, painted, and reopened. But for those who survived, time never truly moved forward. Min Reveal 4. Final. Years later, when one survivor returned for the first time, he found a single clock in the hallway, still frozen at 12:08, the moment the killers took their own lives. It had never been fixed, a silent reminder of a day that refused to fade. Columbine wasn't just a crime scene anymore. It was a scar etched into a nation's conscience, a warning that no community, no matter how quiet or safe, is immune to darkness. In the days after Columbine, America searched for something, an explanation, a reason, someone to blame. But there was no single answer. Reporters blamed video games, politicians blamed guns, psychologists blamed loneliness, parents blamed themselves.
And through it all, one truth remained. No one ever thought it could happen in their town. Columbine became more than a tragedy. It became a turning point. School doors were locked, cameras installed, and drills practiced like fire alarms. Teachers learned how to barricade doors. Students learned how to hide. Words like lockdown and active shooter entered the American vocabulary. Because two boys once decided the world had ignored them. But the lesson was deeper than security. It was about the silent warning signs. Anger left unchecked, isolation ignored, pain dismissed as teenage rebellion. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold didn't simply snap. They evolved in plain sight. Their notebooks, their websites, their words, all shouted for attention long before the bullets did. Mini reflection. In the 25 years since Columbine, the United States has witnessed hundreds of school shootings. Each time, the same questions return. Why didn't anyone see it coming? Why does it keep happening? The answers are still painful, still unfinished. For survivors, life became a series of echoes, sudden noises, anniversaries, dreams that ended at 12:08. Some rebuilt, some never could. Yet every one of them carried a piece of that day. A reminder that evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a school uniform. The final irony of Columbine is that the killers wanted to be remembered. And they were, but not as heroes, as warnings. They wanted the world to notice them. Instead, the world noticed what we'd been ignoring all along. If this story made you stop and think, share it. Tell us, where are you listening from? At home? On your way to work? Your voice matters. Your thoughts, your fear, your hope. Like, comment, and let us know how stories like this should be told. Not to glorify evil, but to learn from it. Because remembering Columbine isn't about the killers,
It's about making sure there's never another one. Thank you for listening to Crimes That Shock the World, where we uncover the moments that changed history and the lessons humanity cannot afford to forget.